The Real Deal, Episode 176, Fiber versus Copper. Welcome to CNET.com's The Real Deal. I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Rafe Needleman.
And this is the show where we try to help you understand some tech topics, answer your questions, and we have a special guest to help us today, Mr. John Chaffee, CEO and Chairman of the Board of Directors of ASSIA Incorporated. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
All right.
Welcome aboard.
Well, nice to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're also a professor emeritus at Stanford University, right?
Yes, that's correct.
What did you teach when you were at Stanford?
I was a professor in the electrical engineering department for about 25 years and taught the communications classes there.
Okay.
Communications, you mean electrical communications?
Yeah,
or person-to-person
electrical
communication?
communications.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, we wanted to have Mr. Chaffee on to discuss internet connectivity to the home. We'll talk a little bit about what fiber is, what copper is, what the difference is between fiber to the curb, fiber to the node, all that stuff. Try to get you to wrap your head around that. And then we'll talk about something called DSM. We'll get to that in a little bit. So let's start it off. What is fiber, and how does it carry a signal differently than copper? When people see this, oh, I got Verizon Fios or UVerse, how's that different from DSL or cable?
Okay, well, both mechanisms, fiber and copper, of course, are ways of conveying messages from one place to another. The fiber you could think of as a pole of glass, if you will, and if you had a flashlight at one end, turning on and off the flashlight in different patterns creates a message that you transport from one end of the pole of glass to the other. And fiber is just a very, very thin pole, if you will, and it bends a little bit, but it carries messages with light, and there's just a single strand. Copper, on the other hand, is a couple of wires, and you could think of sending messages on those wires by connecting and disconnecting a battery so that some signal or voltage is carried across the pair of wires, and the pattern again represents the message on the copper.
So in both cases, you're talking about a digital signal either on or off.
Yes. Today, almost all communications transported on wires or fiber, or for that matter, wireless, have become digital.
Okay. But in both cases, you can fit more than one signal on a wire or a wire or fiber at the same time, right?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
And one of the key differences is if you thought of the message that's being carried on a copper wire as being carried by this big muscular guy who enters this path, what happens is the further he goes, the smaller, the more tired he gets. And copper is also a good antenna. So it will attract noise. So anything from your hair dryer to lights to TV sets create interference. So as he progresses down this path and gets more and more tired, noise looks bigger to him. So it gets harder to discern the messages and understand what's been transported. So there's a length limit on copper. Fiber, on the other hand, has those same effects, but they're much less pronounced. So the light traverses the glass much further before it becomes attenuated, and very little noise can get into an optical fiber. So generally speaking, a fiber has, for any given length, will carry more messages than the copper will. So there's what we call a bandwidth difference in electrical engineering, meaning more messages can be transported on an optical fiber.
So everybody should use optical instead.
Well, the problem with the optical fiber, of course, is the cost. And we have close to 1 billion phone lines around the world, and they're already in place. And they have data carrying capability that can get up to 100 megabits or even to gigabit speeds, depending on the length. So if you can carry that type of data rate on telephone line twisted pairs, and that's sufficient for most broadband customers, then the cost of digging up streets or replacing rose bushes and so forth to install fiber to everyone's home can be very, very high relative to the zero cost of just using the existing copper.
And to be clear, that's what your company is about.
That's what my company is about.
Okay. So the whole push of getting people or municipalities or Verizon or whatever doing fiber to the home is something you think is not always necessary, or is
that's correct. You will find that placing a fiber will cost about $20,000 to $1 million a mile. So if you can divide that cost by lots of customers, then it becomes cost effective to do that. But if it's just for one customer, it's certainly not cost effective. So one of the questions at the beginning of the broadcast was fiber to the node, fiber to the curb. How far do you carry the fiber before you switch to copper? is really the question.
And yeah, and what is the difference between fiber to the node, fiber to the curb, fiber to the home? Because at some point it's copper coming into my computer, right? It's not a fiber optic cable right up into the back of my...
That's right. In very few instances you will see a fiber optic cable going all right to your computer, but those are rare. So it's really the length of the copper. Fiber to the known node means a longer length of copper, typically 1 kilometer, 3,000 feet roughly range for fiber to the node, whereas fiber to the curb is shorter. So it's going to be typically less than 1,000 feet of copper. So then a higher bandwidth on that shorter length of copper, but it costs more to do fiber to the curb than it costs to do fiber to the node, and fiber to the home is the most expensive.
What's the node?
The node is typically it's a distribution node in telephone lingo, and it's basically a cabinet in your neighborhood where up to several hundred customers are served, and typically green box that you see out there. So fiber goes there, and then the electronics that would convert signals for the copper, namely the DSL service, would begin at that node point. There's another smaller box at the curb, typically handles 10 customers, 20 customer type range, and so it's another potential termination point for the fiber, and electronics can be placed to carry the signals the rest of the way to the customer.
Okay.
So is it better to get fiber to the curb over fiber to the node? Do I get a better connection? If like, for instance, Fios is fiber to the curb, but you versus fiber to the node, does that make Fios better somehow?
Well, the potential maximum data carrying capability of fiber to the curb would be higher. So the question is whether the customer will use that data rate and is willing to pay for it.
Okay. So one of the things that you have been working on, your company has been working on, is called DSM. What is that? Dynamic
Spectrum Management. And basically you can think of that as some sophisticated management software that would run in the telephone company's network somewhere, or even can be done over the internet, where the problems that are associated with the length of the copper pair are mitigated. Particularly, the noise is reduced substantially by dynamic spectrum management. There are a number of sources of noise, and they can be managed rather than just letting them occur and distort the signal. So typically, you can get a much higher data rate on the copper with DSM than you can achieve without DSM.
So essentially, you're taking the existing lines and squeezing a little more out of them.
Yes, we are definitely squeezing probably a lot more out of them than is currently possible with DSM.
So you go to the telcos or the ISPs. I guess the telcos are the ones who run the wires.
Yes.
Or excuse me, or the cables or whatever, and you say scratch that fiber order and go with us instead. And then you take existing cable stuff that's already buried in the ground, and then you put little gizmos to boost or enhance the signal? Is that how it works?
It's actually all done in software. So we use the existing DSL networks that they have, and there is a computer workstation or cluster of them in the network. And every day it solicits information from the DSL connection about how well is it performing. So not the actual user's messages, but just fundamental parameters like the speed and how much noise did we see today and yesterday, the day before. And then it will automatically optimize any programmable settings for that DSL on an individual line basis.
Cool. So this is for DSL, not. I mean, I have Comcast, which is over the cable line. So I guess that's coax.
Yes.
Not DSL. So this is your technology is for DSL.
That's right.
Okay. And how fast can you get it up to?
Well, typically you would see today on the systems in the field, we have about 20 million customers that we serve already. My company for DSL. Typically, they are getting about a 25 to 30% reach increase, which means the same data rate, whether it's 6 megabits or 20 megabits, whatever the speed happens to be, will go about 20 or 30% further.
Okay.
And so that means about 50% more customers can get speeds than could earlier.
And that doesn't require new hardware out at the nodes?
No, it does not.
Only at the central office? Okay,
that's
cool.
right.
So how much should the consumer care about this one way or the other? Is this even a consumer issue?
Well, it is a consumer issue in the sense that if they want to get video applications of whatever type, whether it's TV, IPTV, YouTube, other types of things, they typically require higher speeds to be able to service those applications. So DSM will carry more customers over the threshold of being enabled for the newer types of video services we see on the internet.
Now, our phone lines are open, 888-900-CNET, 888-900-2638. So if you're watching this live, you can give us a call. If you have a question about fiber or copper or DSL, John has agreed to hang around and answer those. And any other questions he happens to know the answer to. We can take some electrical engineering questions, I guess, as well.
I'm going to ask one last one about the consumer of broadband services in the home. And you've taught not just the technology that your company is based on, but communications, electrical engineering in general. How much speed do we need coming into the house anyway? I mean, yeah, technology keeps getting more and more advanced. There's more video, et cetera, but how much speed is enough?
Well, the answer to that question today is certainly 100 megabits per second or less per customer will satisfy all of the needs. And you can get that on copper to about 3,000 feet or 1 kilometer.
Okay. So 100 megabits, that's way more than I get. But I can't imagine ever using it except for an occasional software download. I mean, what?
That's why I said the maximum.
Yeah.
So if you had several HDTV signals coming to your home, you could get into that range.
So you're talking about when entertainment content switches over from being distributed the way it is over to IP, then you're going to need that kind of connection.
That's really a maximum that we know of today, and it's hard sometimes even to get to that maximum.
Yeah.
Well, and it seems like that maximum continually moves out a little bit as time goes on and more services come out. A few years ago, nobody was streaming any video, and now they are. Is there a limit in the on the horizon where it's like, okay, now that we've got high def video streaming everywhere, we won't need more after a while?
Well, in my 30 years of working in the telecom industry, I've never seen the need for bandwidth go down. Sometimes it levels for a period of time, and then it goes up with new applications. Certainly the advent of web browsers in the mid-90s and such bumped up the need for bandwidth, and now some video applications are bumping up that need again. And we should never underestimate the creativity of the many people out there who may come up with a new application that requires yet even more bandwidth.
Somebody will come up with something that'll eat up all that available bandwidth, huh?
If you build it, they will come.
They'll figure it out.
Direct brain broadcasting transplants.
Something like that.
There you go.
All right, let's go to let's move on to our questions. First one comes by email. This one is from Mark. Says, "Hey Tom and Rafe, I wanted your input on where the future is regarding watching movies at home." So very appropriate to what we were just talking about. Says he ditched his Blockbuster account for getting DVDs by mail because he didn't watch enough to justify the monthly fee. Redbox is fine. Redbox is that rental service. He says he's also familiar with Roku, but it seems limited with selection and quality of picture. Where do you think the industry is going? Is Blu-ray going to be the standard for high definition movies? Or will we be able to get high-def quality movies at home via a device like Apple TV?
And he says here also this is for theater rooms, so I guess high-def is really the watchword there. And I guess Roku gets a wider selection all the time and is high-def as well.
Well, I actually think Roku may be what he's looking for. It has a wider selection of movies now because it does have the Amazon Video on Demand.
Yep.
It streams in high def. All the online rentals, though, do have that 24-hour viewing period. I don't know of anybody who's gotten around that. That's a licensing restriction put in by the studios.
That is awful, by the way. I used to get movies downloaded onto my PC for watching on airplanes, and if my trip was, I'd watch like half of it before I'd have to close it and land, and then I'd get on the airplane to come back, and the movie had expired. Hated that.
Yeah.
I've used Amazon Video, Amazon On Demand, and I really like it because I can watch it directly on my TiVo, which is a good feature.
Yeah,
for those 3 people out there who still have TiVos.
And Amazon has been moving into a lot of other places, just as Netflix is almost everywhere. And this goes to what John was saying about the creativity. We're probably going to see even more of those sorts of services come along.
And predominantly part of the question was also on the format, and I think MPEG-4 is the one that will win in the future. It's increasingly being used, and that is one of the more efficient video compression methods.
All right.
So Dave the psychologist writes in, here's the deal. I have a rather large home network, and it seems large to me anyway, he says. In the spare bedroom, I have a Linksys WRT54G that has 3 wired connections. I'm going to try to summarize here because there's a lot of detail. Plus, we have 6 or 8 computers hooked wirelessly. Now, everyone, all 4 of us, prints through my iMac. I would like to have another printer in the spare bedroom hooked up for all of us to share. It's an old Lexmark all-in-one, if that matters. Currently, we use it solely as a fax machine. And the question is how to do this. He says, I guess I could buy another AE, but I would like a somewhat cheaper way to go. I'm not averse to tinkering with stuff, and I have enough old machine parts around that I could easily build another computer if need be. Love the show. So, Dave, I think the simplest solution, although it's not free and it won't use all your extra machine parts, would be to get a USB to Ethernet print server. Just search for USB print server. They're about $70, and that should do it. Now, the thing about those is that if you have an all-in-one, that solution will probably work fine for printing, but not so much if you want to use it for like scanning. So it's kind of one direction. You might also want to look at your router. I know the WRT54 series, I don't believe has a USB port on it, but many newer routers, which, by the way, will also have higher speed Wi-Fi, like DraftN, will have a USB port built in that will do print serving for you. And if you ever want to replace your WRT54G with a GL that doesn't work, just call me. I have an extra, and I replaced it with the D-Link, and it works much better.
All right, let's take our first phone call on the line is Ian, and I believe this is a question that John may have the need to answer because it looks a little too high-tech for me. Hey, Ian, thanks for calling The Real Deal.
Hello.
What's your question?
So basically, Quest around here, I'm in the Denver metro area. We've got Quest and Comcast. Comcast is coax, Quest is DSL. I heard they are actually rolling out what they call VDSL2 technology, and that's kind of like what Uverse has with AT&T, except newer and faster and better. However, they used to be rolling out what they call fiber to the node or fiber optic internet, ADSL2+, which has, I'm hearing, a longer reach but lower speeds. And my question is whether it seems like they're just trying to deploy VDSL2 from here on out, whether that means that customers with who are, say, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 feet from the central office aren't going to get as good speeds as with Quest technology they were normally rolling out, which, granted, it's not all that great. It only has 896K up, but I've got people in this town that are limited to 1.5 megs down, and it'd be kind of annoying that if they had to stick around there and not get the next-gen technology.
So your question is what's the difference?
Well, kind of, and whether Quest is sacrificing something by going with VDSL2 on their new installs over ADSL2+.
John, can you give us some insight there?
Not really sacrificing anything. The VDSL2 is faster, has a max speed at 150 megabits per second, whereas the ADSL2 Plus can go to only 25 megabits per second. Both of those are length dependent. What would happen is the Quest program, I believe, is attempting to get to fiber to the node or even fiber to the curb in some situations, which would enable the higher speeds. If it's a 6,000-foot loop, it can really only be served by ADSL2 Plus and its capabilities. What you are seeing is in the newer types of equipment that is available, they have an option to do ADSL2 Plus or VDSL2, which is automatically selected by the equipment, so you would have the benefit of either. I can't speak specifically here on the air. I do have NDAs in place with Quest, but that would be generally a good equipment selection choice by most service providers worldwide as we proceed into an era where VDSL2 will become more prevalent and the older ADSL technology will go away.
Basically, the VDSL2, if it sees that, you're not going to get as good of a signal because you're 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 feet out, then it'll just fall back to ADSL2 Plus. It's fully backward compatible.
That's right. The newer equipment has that capability.
All right. Thanks, Ian. Appreciate the call. Let's go take an email real quick while Rafe researches the next call. Dennis Keefe wrote in and said, is the Adonix NAS adapter as good as Pogo plug? The reason I ask is it's about $50 cheaper. Thanks for the quick question, Dennis. Well, I haven't used the Pogo plug, but Rafe has, and
yeah.
I have used the NAS adapter. I think Pogo plug is what you want. The reason is Adonix is pretty good for Windows, not so good for Mac. I don't know if you use Mac, but they're set up differently. Pogo plug shares your drive on the net naturally. That's what it's meant to do. It's really easy to set up, whereas Adonix is just a way to adapt a USB drive to Ethernet. So it only really shares it on the LAN. You have to configure your router if you want to share it on the net, which you can totally do. It's just not as easy to set up as Pogo plug.
If you have a pogo plug, your problems are pretty much solved. This is a really simple to use device for sharing a hard drive either on your local net or pieces of it outside the net on the internet, so you can share pictures that are, say, automatically copied to your network drive to people who are outside your net. Very, very easy solution. I haven't used mine in about a month, but I was using it for a while. I really like it. I think it might be a little simple for some geeks, but it's a very good solution. And the thing about it that is really good is because it uses a service, a pogoplug.com service, like an instant messenger, you don't have to deal with opening up ports or configuring your router. The service kind of does all that lookup for you and connects people from the outside world, uses that as a directory service to connect you to your Pogo plug. So the setup is extremely simple. I really do like the device very much.
All right, we got another call that I think John will be able to answer. This one is Mike in Seattle. Hi, Mike. Welcome to The Real Deal.
Hi. I just have a question for your guest. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. But aren't we going to have to upgrade to fiber optic lines in the future anyway, since fiber optics have a maximum data transfer of 10 gigabits, and as you just said, copper is limited at 100 megabits?
Well, copper, for instance, is not. It depends on the length, of course. I would give you an example. 10 gigabit Ethernet is available today, and that carries 10 gigabits per second on 4 telephone wires, so 2.5 gig each. It's only 100 meters, so definitely depends on the length. So there really is no inherent bandwidth limitation to either fiber or copper. So it's really more a question of how much you need and how much it costs to provide that. And running fiber to your home is the most expensive way to get to the highest possible bandwidth limit, but do you really need that? So that's the question. If everyone's using 10 gigabits or 100 gigabits someday individually, then they would need a fiber to get to those types of speeds typically. But if they're only going to use 100 megabits or a few hundred megabits per second, that can be achieved on the copper.
So sort of in the long term, you know, as you say, as we get all creative and start pushing a lot more bandwidth, then it might make sense because we need too many nodes of copper. Is that sort of a way of putting it, or?
Yeah, it's a cost trade-off that they have to do based on the number of customers who are willing to pay and how much are they willing to pay. But it becomes very, very expensive to run fiber to everyone's home.
All right, let's go to our next call. This is Anwan on the line from Houston. Hey, Anwan, welcome to The Real Deal.
Hey, Tom, how's it going?
Doing well, man. What's your question today?
I have an Xbox 360. I'm trying to have it recognize a 200 gigabyte hard drive, but since they only use FAT32, it really can't do anything over 32 gigs. And I was wondering if you have a workaround to that.
Well, FAT32, I was looking at this. FAT32 is the answer. You could partition multiple drives there.
Okay.
The other thing you can do is you can not connect it to your Xbox, but rather connect it over Ethernet or use your local network and try that way. Have you tried that?
I have, but for playing high-def video, it gets kind of choppy.
Yeah.
Looking for direct, hard drive connection. So
I got to ask Josh, our Xbox geek, sits across the hall from me.
Have you tried partitioning it, though?
yes. And I've heard that Windows won't make a FAT32 volume any bigger than 32 gigs, but I've heard that Linux will. If you hook it up to Linux and maybe format it that way, it'll do bigger FAT32 partitions than 32 gigabytes. So I might try that. I'm
looking at some answers to that question in various forums around the net, and there are some utilities that look like they may do that, but I haven't used them myself, so I don't know which of these would work or how difficult they are, but it looks like there are some utilities that will help you mount different
the other problem,
partitions.
even if you can get a partition bigger than 32 gigabytes, the file size limit on FAT32 is 4 gigs. So if you're talking about high-def movies, you might outdistance that as well.
Exactly. Yeah, that's another problem.
Yeah, it seems like that network way is the best trick. John, you got any any tricks for him there?
Unfortunately,
yeah.
no.
Okay.
All right, you stumped the room, but we'll definitely put your question in the show notes and see if we get any better answers that way.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Anwan. Let's go to the emails. We got another one here from Jasper. It says, I'm a bit old school, I admit that, but likely the thing that spoils my day most is the media that just auto-start in my browser. Why, oh, why do people do that? Somebody a lot smarter than me must have made a tool that enables you to remove all sound from any application that is not approved. I work a lot of times with some good songs, and I'm even known to spend time on podcasts, so I have sound on. He doesn't want to just turn the speakers off, but he hates getting a web page that launches a bunch of audio at him. So
my solution to just turn off your speakers wouldn't do.
no, it's not going to work for him.
So
Depending on your browser, in Internet Explorer, you can go to Internet Options, Advanced tab, Multimedia, and uncheck play sounds in the web pages. Easy. Opera has a one-click option to disable sounds in a web page. If you're on Firefox, though, which I'm guessing he is, you got to use a plugin. It's a plugin called Autoplay. We got a Lifehacker article that I'll throw in the show notes for you. But you might want to switch to using Opera. It sounds like the easier way to go.
there's another solution if you can wait about a month, which is to go to Windows 7, which will have per application volume settings. So if you're running if you're playing your media through iTunes or something, you could turn off sound in the browser entirely while leaving iTunes sound on, or you could be streaming in one browser and pull up a different browser, Firefox and IE, or IE and Firefox, or whatever, Chrome, and turn one browser on and one browser off. But that's coming in Windows 7. I don't think Vista has per app volume. No, I know Vista doesn't have per app volume settings, but Windows 7 will.
All right, got a couple of comments to finish us off here. The first one comes from Dr. Carl, said, I've always used Virtual Dub to play movies backwards. It was a question from last week. It is free and feature-packed, so we'll include a link to that in the show notes. Allows you to reverse a video clip and play it backwards. Pretty sweet.
I want to correct here. The lovely chat room is calling BS on me, saying Vista does have per application volume settings. I haven't seen it.
Well,
So
you don't have to wait then.
What's that? Yeah, so you can try now. Go hack around in Vista and find the thing I haven't had to change your volume settings per
My
apps.
guess is the guy is in XP, and he doesn't want to have to pay to upgrade just to get rid of the sound. So
That would be an expensive fix. Yeah.
Finally, David, the recent CS grad from the University of Iowa, says, Tom and Rafe asked for free and cheap software for students. Check out Microsoft DreamSpark at dreamspark.com. Your school may have a club called OSUM, sponsored by Sun, which has lots of Sun-related software. As a benefit, also student members of the ACM get MSDN AA at acm.org, and we'll have all those links in the show notes as well at realdeal.cnet.com.
And now looking at DreamSpark, if you want cheap apps from Microsoft, DreamSpark is developer apps. They got Visual Studio, SQL Server, Robotics Developer Studio, Windows Server, stuff like that. I don't see Windows or Office in here, so for those, you might want to, again, check out the Ultimate Steel, where you can get Office for next to nothing.
All right, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks for calling. We'll be back again next week. We are live every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific at live.cnet.com. John Chaffee, thank you so much for schooling us. We would have never been able to pass along this information without you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
And if people want to find out more about DSM or your company, where can they go?
They can go to the company website, www.cia-incinc.com, or they can go even to my Stanford webpage. Just Google me, CIOFFI, and you'll find me that way.
All right, that's how I found it. So, don't forget, next time it's Rafe and Cooley. I'll be out next Thursday, so who knows what they'll be cooking up.
We'll talk about space. I don't know what we'll talk about.
Something like that. Send along your suggestions, realdeal@cnet.com. Talk to other listeners at forums.cnet.com. And don't forget that you can watch us live at live.cnet.com. Thanks for listening or watching, however you have consumed the show. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
What's up, Brian Tong here, and if you want the scoop for all the good and bad inside the Apple world, then the only thing you should be watching is CNET's Apple Bite. I'll give you the latest news, rumors, tips, apps of the week, and even call out the bad apples. So watch it all at cnet.com/AppleBite, and I'll see you there.